We've reached the end of the show, and it's time for Under the Radar. What are the stories that have gone under the radar, the ones that should be noticed that haven't been, this week? Rachel, what have you got?
I'm going to talk about rental reform, which is really, really important, I think, given that if you think the mortgage rates crisis is bad, look at what's going on with renters, particularly in London and cities in expensive areas. So the government, despite having promised for many, many years that they were going to introduce the Renters Reform Bill, which would ban no-fault evictions, Section 21 evictions, where it's not your fault, you're not behind on your rent or anything, but your landlord just decides they want to kick you out, they're going to drop it. And it has been pointed out there are a high number of Conservative MPs who are also landlords, which could be something to do with it. It's also, every time this debate comes up, people say, but if you drive landlords out of the market, then you'll have fewer rental properties and rents will go up and it'll be even worse for renters, which is always quite confusing for me because there'll be the same number of houses. The houses aren't disappearing. But I think rental reform is a massive, massive issue that is as important as building more houses, because the housing crisis, the housing shortage, housing insecurity is at the root of so many economic and social challenges in this country. And we have to be able to get this right, and we have to have an answer for people's stability and their well-being and the lives of their children and their employment prospects and literally everything that isn't simply, save up and buy a house. But it has to be something more on offer.
Matt?
So I don't know if this counts as under the radar or not, but I do think it is a story that is interesting and important, the cap on the bankers' bonuses being scrapped.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because I think it sort of represents two things about politics at the moment. On the one hand, it's a good example of a policy that did the opposite of what it was trying to do. They were trying to have bankers basically get lower bonuses, but what it did was it meant that it just increased their base level of pay, and then that actually made banks less stable because they had to pay people more even if they weren't doing as well. But also scrapping it also feels like the wrong thing to do. So I feel like the government are in this kind of weird double bind now where they did something right for the wrong reasons and now doing something wrong for the right reasons in a way. And it feels like if the Labour Party don't make more of this, then I don't know what they're doing, because it's such an obvious thing to throw at particularly Rishi Sunak, who comes from the financial sector, to say you're focusing on scrapping bonuses for people who already have way more money than anyone else could possibly imagine. It just feels very tin-eared and very sort of relevant to what's happening in politics at the moment.
It's also a Liz Truss policy.
It's the one thing from the Rishi, it's from the Kwasi Kwarteng budget that survived.
That Rishi Sunak has adopted a year on, and she and her crowd are going around saying, see, he's stealing all our ideas.
Oh, God, what a thought. Feargal, what's under the radar?
I applaud Rachel for bringing up the rental review, and I can give you a personal example. As a father of a 22-year-old daughter, leaving college, trying to find somewhere to live in Cardiff, and a landlord demanding 6 months' worth of rent in advance. Welcome to the modern rental market. Luckily for my daughter, she has a father called Feargal, so I was able to make all kinds of interesting things happen and take care of it. But what in God's name does another 22-year-old graduate do faced with that kind of consideration? You're in a tent outside Tesco.
I think I'm right in saying that Prime Minister's Questions today, on the day we're recording, Rishi Sunak talked about that and said, our focus is on making more people homeowners. And I think it's exactly the point you're making, that, sure, that's a good idea, but there are always going to be people who can't own homes for all sorts of reasons. So, and it almost feels to me like a bit like the comparison between people on PAYE and self-employed, that people sort of focus on wage growth and stuff, but forget that self-employed people have a very different way of living. And just because there are slightly fewer of us doesn't mean that we don't matter as well.
I also think just fundamentally when it comes to renting and to landlordism, there is this idea that if you have some extra money, you can buy a property and you can rent it out, and that's fine. But you shouldn't have to work very hard to earn that money. And again, other countries have a more of a professionalised rental sector, which is companies or organisations or cooperatives that own properties and rent them out, and that invest in making them safe, decent places to live in a good state of repair. Whereas some of the rental horror stories I've heard, and I'm sure listeners will have their own, with landlords who seem to really resent having tenants who pay them rent every month and really resent having to maintain the property, and who feel very put upon that their very ungrateful tenants want them to fix broken windows and dodgy plumbing or what else. And it's just an interesting way of thinking about it, that you are entitled to that money without doing anything to actually earn it. So maybe we need a bit of a mindset change as well.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thanks for joining us, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Matt.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, special guest Feargal Sharkey.
Thank you for the invitation.
Now,
Pleasure.
there's no point having your own podcast if you can't pull a stunt like this. So, hold on.
Oh, God, here we go.
Here we go. Right, I need your signature.
See, now you want to talk to me about shite and
On
rivers, don't you?
this. I need your signature on
Oh,
this
stop
copy
it.
of Jimmy by the Undertones. Now, those watching on YouTube will be able to see this pristine copy.
And
the
yes, that
classic
is
single.
me.
This is
That is
Feargal
actually me.
in his youth.
For a cup for singing in Irish.
There you go. Well, if you could possibly sign that for me, just to Andrew,
Most definitely will.
You will make an old man very happy, or indeed a happy man very old. Brilliant. Thanks very much.
You're more than welcome very much.
There we go.
Normally
Really
people,
must stop meeting like this, Feargal Sharkey. Brilliant.
normally people ask for refunds. But, too late, mate. I spent that money.
I'll cherish it.
My daughter's landlords had it.